I'm Elisa Parker. We are broadcasting here from the 17th Annual Wild and Scenic Film Festival. It's the largest environmental film festival of its kind in the United States, if you can imagine that. And we're based in Nevada City in Grass Valley, California, right at the base of the Sierras. It's such a gift to be able to connect with these everyday extraordinary environmental action heroes, one of which is Ayana Young. Not only is she screening a film here, When Old Growth Dies?
When Old Growth Ends.
When Old Growth Ends. And also she's doing a podcast as well from her podcast series at Heartwood, which is in downtown Nevada City as well. So welcome to Wild and Scenic,
Thank you
Ayana.
so much.
It's good to have you here with us.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. It's been so warm, and the people I've already been able to connect with in the last 12 hours has felt like just a gift. So thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Yeah. Where does your personal passion and interest stem from that connection and featuring the old growth forests?
Well, gosh, it's it's a really wonderful question, and it's something that almost feels challenging to put into words, because for me, I feel a very strong sense that the reason why I'm alive is to be a servant for the forest, and specifically the temperate rainforest. But it wasn't something that I necessarily knew I was born into, but it was something that I developed over years. And it kind of, I can look back at my life and see these little moments that I was so drawn to these forests. And over time, the more and more experiences that I had with them, the forest spoke to me, and the forest continues to speak to me. And the one thing that I do is when I hear it, I don't hesitate, and I say, of course.
Right.
If the forest asks me to witness them as they're being slaughtered, I say, of course, how do I get there? If they say, plant my children, I say, of course, but how do I do that? And for me, it's always about how do I do it with integrity, and how do I understand the forest in a deep time way? Because I think in our dominant culture, we're constantly trying to find these very quick solutions, and they're usually very resource extensive and in the capitalist framework. So the forest has been teaching me so much for so many years, but I never grow tired of being with them. It's just an incredible relationship. They're family to me.
Well, it is an interesting process and experience, is the way you're expressing that, in that, when I hang out and go on walks amongst the trees and thinking that they've been here, some of the trees for a couple hundred years in the Sierras, because some had been logged, and just knowing that in our own human lifespan, it's really not as long when you compare, especially to the old growth redwood forests, for example. So how does that tie into when you are looking at protection and solutions and protecting one of the most important plant species of our planet, really?
Yeah. Well, I look at the temperate rainforest as an entire bioregion. And so that's why my talk today, from the Redwoods to the Copper River Delta, I'm really exploring the threats and the solutions from the Redwoods, and you could maybe say about Santa Cruz area, all the way up through Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, a little bit of the Yukon, and then into Southeast Alaska. And when I'm thinking about deep time, because of course redwoods, people say, maybe the oldest redwood is around 3,000 years old, but really they found that they can be on 50,000-year-old root systems. Wow. So these are ancient beings that have so much to teach us about being resilient with climate change, how to live through really destructive times. But one thing that I really notice is that to understand how to move forward with protecting a forest or restoring a forest, you actually have to build relationship with the land, and really build relationship with the first peoples who understood how to tend that land. And so for me, a lot of my work is about slowing down and listening really deeply, and not coming in with a human supremacist mindset that I know how to do, and I've read a book about science, or I've gotten a degree, and so now I can come into a forest and make decisions. No, it's slow down and really look, well, how does a forest grow? How does water flow? How does water soak into soil? I mean, these are questions that all of us can observe and understand. And something that I'm doing with my 1 Million Redwoods project, which is a large-scale reforestation project of the southern temperate rainforest, is what I think is really interesting, and is most of reforestation projects are actually been created by logging industry. So again, that's not about deep time. That's about get those trees in the ground because we want to profit off of them because we want to cut them down as soon as possible. So what do? They go into clear cuts. Well, one, they clear cut. Two, they spray poison. They inoculate with trees that have been insecticide covered and, fertilizer, petro fertilizers. And then they put a redwood boop right in the middle of a clear cut. But if you look at a forest, the redwood isn't the first tree that comes up. What's the first? What comes up first? Well, you think you have to build soil for years upon years upon years, and the understory plants come in, and the fungi come in, and then the redwood, and then the cedar, late successional trees. And so for me, it's less about how do we do this as quickly as possible. And I know there's an urgency. I feel an urgency, of course, with climate destabilization. I feel very urgent to make sure we can fix things as quickly as possible. But at the same time, we cannot rush these processes. An old growth forest didn't happen in one human lifetime.
One lifetime, that's for sure. Yeah. And I love it's so important too that you bring up the interconnectedness of all these other elements of plant life and soils, the micronutrients that support that. And it's interesting to see how we're even connected to that as human beings. And because we've gotten so disconnected. What is that experience like for you in having that connection and experience? Like you live in Mendocino, there are some old growth redwood forests there. So like what has that been like for you to develop that connection in that sense?
Yeah. Well, I've been an urban suburban gal for the majority of my life. So I'll just straight up, I was not born into an activist family. I didn't camp till I was 25 years old. Like literally, like didn't set up a tent. Like I'd never had done anything that was, more nature oriented, or one would say like, we didn't go on hikes with my family. That wasn't something that I was raised into. But when it just something that clicked so potently. And then because when I think back of these memories, it's hard to explain because it's a feeling sense, but I guess there was a moment in time where I started to understand the complexities of the time that we're living in. The Anthropocene, the sixth mass extinction, massive climate destabilization, global crisis, peak water, global capitalism tearing everything down. And that was coming into an education of with that, as well as being really connected with the forest. And so there was just a moment that I said, this is what I'm going to do. And so when I moved out to Mendocino, I ended up living in a tent, I was telling you, for 2 years with no running water or electricity. And during that time, I really was able to strip down the human conditioning that took me away from the land. And I was able to reconnect with the land. Really challenging. I mean, this isn't some romantic Instagram account where
and in Mendocino, it's raining all the time. It's cold. It's damp.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not some romanticized vision of relationship with human and nature. Relationships are hard. It doesn't matter if it's your lover, your family, your mom. It doesn't matter. Relationships are hard. So it's not to say they're not worth it. But I think that when we want to rebuild or build relationships with the land, we have to put a lot of time into it, a lot of attention, and we have to be in it for the long haul, because this is not something that we can just snap our fingers and put our iPhone on it and suddenly, we're best friends with the trees. And so I really want to give all of my gratitude for my work to them for teaching me so much, and they are my family, and that's how I see them.
Ayana, where can folks go to learn more about your project and your podcast series? She's also connected with and interviewed other extraordinary individuals like Ayana who are doing this great work in connection with our planet and the wild world. So where can they go to?
So you can go to forthewild.world, and you can learn about When Old Growth Ends, the film that we're screening here, the For the Wild podcast, the 1 Million Redwoods project, and other projects that we have going on. You can also download the podcast on Spotify or iTunes or anywhere that you get your podcasts from, or stream it from our website.
The film is called When Old Growth Ends, and I want to learn more too about the Redwood project.
The 1 million redwoods.
1 million redwoods. That's a big, ambitious number.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm. The forest is very ambitious through me, so I say yes.
I love that. Ayana Young, thank you so much for being part of Wild and Scenic Film Fest. I'm Elisa Parker, and we are broadcasting extraordinary stories like Ayana's here at Wild and Scenic Film Fest. We'll have more coming up.
Wow.